Hello Giants fans, welcome to Giants Baseball 101. I'm Gabe Vaughn, your host. The Giants beat the Phillies 7-4 today, so they completed a 3-game sweep. I was wrong about this being a 4-game series, it's just 3 games, so they swept the Phillies. They were able to work around Ross Stripling's typical poor performance by scoring those runs. And it was RBI singles by Casey Schmidt and Blake Sable in the first inning. Then in the 8th, by Tyro Estrada and Joey Bart and Mitch Haniger and Wilmer Flores. All of those RBI singles. In total, they scored 7 runs for the Giants. They beat the Phillies 7-4. In the bullpen, again, it was pretty good today. Jacob Junis, John Brebbia, Scott Alexander, and Camilo Doval. They each, all 4 of them, they threw a scoreless inning, and that combined to close out the game. And it was... The real rally for the Giants was in the bottom of the 8th. I mean, it was tied 4-4. And then it was just that combination of those RBI singles by Haniger and Bart, Estrada, and Flores that got the 3 runs on the board. So, I mean, you give credit to John Brebbia, for pitching in the top of the 8th. I think, too, that he had to work out of a rally. And then obviously the Giants' bats for getting things going in the bottom of the 8th. And I think the Giants are getting better now at doing what they need to do when they need to do it. So they sweep the Phillies here, and that's great, honestly. And I really have no reason to doubt that they'll win their next series this week. I mean, if the pattern, the way we've seen it, is followed, we expect them to kind of stay hot for at least a little bit longer. Now, what we take away from all of this, I think, is that the Giants, there has to be a playoff push this year. And that's like totally opposed to just a rebuild effort. And when you see these prospects get, there has to be a playoff push this year. And the reason for that there are just several reasons for that, and they're all really connected to the same thing. First of all, if they were just going to consider this another of their rebuild years, what is the plan going forward? My question there would be, what's the time frame? What year are they going to be able to go for a championship, and not just in that 1 year, but I mean like year after year? What would be the plan going forward? I just don't think there's anything definite. Because back in 2019, after the 2019 season was over, we were told that the Giants were getting a whole farm system ready to challenge the Dodgers. Yes, that's I'm not exaggerating. If I can't remember exactly where I saw that, but I'm not exaggerating. That's what I heard. The Giants' farm system was they were getting all ready to challenge the Dodgers, and that sounds like a bold thing, and yeah, it's meant to, but so far, the only year they kind of came close to challenging them was 2021, and of course that came down to one winner-take-all playoff game that the Dodgers won. But other than that, the Giants have been far inferior there, and they haven't. They haven't been making the playoffs in those close years, and this is exactly what it's going to be, and I totally expect this one to be a close year, going deep into September, but they're going to have to make a rush for it. And the other thing is, well, you don't know what's going to happen in the future. It was an April Fool's joke that Logan Webb had Tommy John surgery. That was my April Fool's joke this year, but, seriously, could things... I'm just saying, I'm not saying what I think stuff's going to happen, but I'm just saying the changes that could be coming, or the unexpected turns of events. What did you think this last offseason was going to be? Even though I don't love the job that Farhan Zaidi's doing altogether, and I never have, I still really believed him when he said that this was going to be a big offseason for the Giants. And just to be fair, it's not like he didn't make an attempt, but the attempt, it certainly wasn't good enough that the Giants really lost out on the offseason. So we totally expected there to be kind of more, if we're really just taking this from a few months ago. So that really doesn't motivate me well. Just say, okay, we're looking. Excuse me. Sorry. We're looking forward to the future. I really don't. I really don't think that it just sounds less and less promising every time, I think about it. And just going back to the thing with just trusting the Giants' prospects and saying they're going to have a great farm system and all that. Well, it took, I'll just say, Joey Bart, right now, he is, his bat is hot. He's getting the key hits for the Giants. All of that is great. He might be, finally developing as a player. It took him a few years, and that's something we kind of have to admit here. Yeah, maybe he was called up too soon. I don't know, but it took him a few years. That's just the fact. Even Logan Webb, was he good immediately on reaching the majors? No, he had a couple of kind of down seasons in 2019 and 2020. It took him a couple of years. You never know what it's going to take a prospect really to develop. And Casey Schmidt, he seems to be real good right now, and that's a good thing. I don't know if there's going to have to be a process with his development, or if he's just going to kill it and kind of get right in there. I'm just saying all that to say I wouldn't just... It's not a very good idea for the Giants to just put all their hopes in a system of prospects for the future and assume that they're all going to work in conjunction and be good all together and just make a good roster and all that. I mean, even starting pitcher Kyle Harrison, he was expected to contribute this year and to be good. I'm not saying he won't, but in spring training he clearly showed that he wasn't ready for the opening day roster yet. I'm just saying that the way some of these things have gone with the Giants, you probably want to think twice before you're just quick to say that everything will turn out in the future if they focus on rebuilding. I really don't think that's the correct philosophy for the Giants right now. And there's misinformation on both sides of the issue. I wouldn't say misinformation. Excuse me. That's I don't know how that came out. That's the wrong word for this, but there's probably stuff that shouldn't be said on both sides of this issue. Like, I don't remember who it was, but somebody, I'm pretty sure I remember somebody after the 2022 season said that this was Farhan Zaidi's 4th year with the Giants, and he pointed out he still hasn't won a championship. That might have been Ben Kaspick. I'm not exactly sure who it was. Now, if you listen to a thing like that, you kind of have to realize there are a lot of teams who are going to go 4-year streaks without winning a championship, including, of course, the Dodgers. I mean, they make the playoffs every year, but that's kind of a pretty typical thing. Still, it's just good to remember that out of those 4 years, with the exception of 2021, which was a 107-win season, there was 2019, 2020, and 2022. All of those years could have been playoff runs, and they all fell through. And if you look at what happened in the trade deadline, at all 3 of those years, you just clearly see the Giants didn't do too much to improve the roster. This was in 2019, 2020, and 2022. Now, even 2021, I am not convinced that the Giants did everything they could do at the trade deadline, or that they really improved their roster all that they could have. I mean, they picked up Chris Bryant, but I think they probably could have done more. But at least you have to say they got Bryant, and I mean, they expected him to be better than he was, and all of that didn't really turn out. But yeah, the Giants, they might have been better able to capitalize on those close ones by just really trying to add talent to their roster. And I think that's just a major reason why it all fell through in all 3 of those years. So that's why in 2023, and I know when you're just in a really close situation, that's probably what it's going to be in the weeks leading up to the trade deadline. It's just going to look really close. That's where it's kind of hard. We kind of have to admit it'd be really hard to have the courage to just go and push through and trade for players like that. But it's got to be done one of these years, because I really, what if that's like all we see from the Giants in the next few years? These close years that are like wild card options at best. And I will say, the Dodgers, do you think they're really going anywhere anytime soon? I kind of don't. It's just hard to imagine that anyone besides them is going to win the National League West anytime soon. There was somebody, as usual, I forget who. I'm sorry for my bad memory here, but there was somebody who was bold enough to predict that the Padres were going to be a contender, and you can kind of see why, because at the end of the day, who won in the division series when the Dodgers and Padres played together last year? It was the Padres. Still, I think in spite of that, the Dodgers are going to maintain their traditional outcome of winning the National League West. And the Diamondbacks, they stayed in first place for a long time, but they couldn't have expected to stay in too long. The Dodgers overtook them. Now, in all of this, what does this really mean for the Giants? Well, in a way, this is going to kind of sound discouraging, because it almost sounds like I'm saying the Giants don't have a chance of contending for the division in the near future. I don't want to be saying that. Just look at 2021. Did we ever expect that they'd be doing anything then? No, we certainly didn't, and yet they won the division that year. But, I mean, at least focusing on this year, it's very clear if the Giants get in, it's going to be through the wild card, and we just kind of have to accept that. So it really goes back to the first question. If this were just going to be a rebuild year, including a semi-rebuild year like last year, we could kind of say what did the front office do with the trade deadline? Well, essentially nothing that was likely to make any difference in the team's result at the end of the year. But look, in my mind, if we don't see, if we see anything other than a full-fledged playoff push, and I'm not saying there aren't expectations of, being prudent and maintaining so that you have players for the future. I'm not saying there aren't some of those things here, but if we see anything other than a reasonably full-fledged playoff pursuit, then I'm gonna call that. I'm gonna put 2023 on my list of rebuild years if that's what I see. And there's a reason for that. It's because a full-fledged playoff push is the only thing that, in my mind, has a significant probability of working out for the Giants. So, assuming we would call it a rebuild year, if they didn't do it, then it just all goes back to my first point about what's the goal and when do the Giants win. Okay, so what year will they be trying for the championship? What would be really necessary for it to be considered a good contending year? Does there have to be a reasonable probability of winning the division? Like I mentioned before, I think we just kind of have to be honest here. I'm not saying we have to like it, but we just have to be honest about the Dodgers, and then, of course, the Padres, too. Just all of the competition, and it may be, and this is going to be a hard thing, but the Giants, to win a championship, like in the near future, they might just have to do what they did in 2014 and get in, kind of sneak into the playoffs, do the wild card, and then work up to the World Series and then win it. That might be the Giants' path to winning a World Series. Anything can happen in the postseason. I mean, it kind of sound like, because, they'd have to beat the Dodgers. I will just say the Dodgers over the past decade have had some kind of surprising losses in the postseason. But October, it's really a time when, anything can happen. Over a 162-game season, you really see things even out to a little more of the way you'd expect them to be. I'm not saying there aren't surprises there, but things kind of maybe level out a bit in the postseason. That's kind of where anything can happen, and really, we know it's the case this year, certainly, but the Giants, on getting there, just kind of have to surprise everybody and make something happen, and they can be hot this year, like just what they did here against the Phillies. It's what they'd have to do in October too. But just for a lot of reasons, it's just pretty clear to me that this year it does have to be a full-fledged playoff push. And of course, there's some balance there, but if you're just looking for a real intermediary balance between contending this year and rebuilding, that's... I mentioned before I just call it a flat-out rebuild year, but just go back with me in the time machine to last year and just remember what happened. I was telling you then, and I'm saying now, the Giants shouldn't have done what they did at the trade deadline. They should have bought. They should have added on players. However, selling would have been a much better option than what they actually did. They had no chance. 2022, they had no chance with the roster they had of making the playoffs. I know, I kind of, when they got hot in August again that year, I kind of got excited about it again. Just believe me, they had, I realize now, from the moment they did nothing really at the trade deadline, they had no chance of getting into the playoffs. Selling, even though I wouldn't have agreed with it, it would have been a much better option. Because they could at least get some prospects and like kind of try them out and fortify that system a little bit. This year, it's got to go better, and hopefully the Giants will learn from their past mistakes and really get on with it and make a full-fledged playoff pursuit. Now, just going back to the here and now, what's happening this week, what's the key to the Giants' turnaround? Well, obviously they're hitting at the right times, and I think, though, that a lot of it is really bullpen improvement. They're pitching well, and I hope that this really lasts. I mean, after the frustrations they experienced, it was just kind of hope for the return of Luke Jackson, which I think you've always got to be careful about getting too excited about a guy who's come back from Tommy John surgery. Sometimes they come back and they pitch great. Sometimes it's not top form, so I would say our attitude about Jackson returning, it really needs to be we're not going to get our hopes up, but if he pitches great, I mean that's great. We can be really glad about that. But yeah, nothing would be a substitute for the relievers the Giants already have in their pen getting their game together, and that's what they appear to be doing. I think that was really the key to the Giants' sweep of the Phillies here, and let's hope that they can continue their success, and really get caught up in that record. Thank you for watching. This has been Giants Baseball 101. Please subscribe if you haven't. Also, please leave your questions and comments. You know where to do it. I'll see you next time on Giants Baseball 101.